Hey everybody, I'm Chris, and this is my channel Chesapeake Chris. Thanks for stopping by. I've had people ask me questions about fishing knots. The internet is just flooded with all kinds of different knots. There must be literally hundreds of them out there. Well, when I did my series of hooks, knots, and knot tying tools, it was 4 different videos. I pretty much showed the knots that I use for my fishing, but I think it kind of got lost in there because I covered so many tools and it was 4 videos. So I think a lot of people missed that part of the videos. So I'm going to make a video now that shows the 4 knots that I use in fishing. I believe in keeping it simple. I don't fly fish, so these 4 knots pretty much do everything I need them to do for the fishing that I do. So if you want to see the 4 knots that I use and how to tie them, please stick around. So I mentioned that I really only use 4 knots in fishing. The Palomar knot, Snell knot, surgeon's figure 8, and the uni knot. So let me show you how to tie each one of these and tell you what I use them for. We'll start with the Palomar knot. The Palomar knot is the knot I always use to tie on swivels. You can also use it to tie lures directly to your line if you don't use swivels. But I'm going to use this high vis yellow. Hopefully it'll show up on the video. But to do a Palomar knot, first you double it back on itself like that, so you have this little loop here. Then you stick this little loop through the ring in either the swivel or the lure. Oops. Then all you do is you come around like this and you tie half of a regular knot like so. Then you take the swivel or the lure and you drop it back through that loop that you had out there on the end. And then you just pull it tight. And that's a good strong knot. It's not going anywhere. That's the one I use for swivels. So to tie my snell knots, I start with my circle hook. And I take my fishing line, I stick it through the eyelet, and I stick it through from the side where the point is. Stick it through the eyelet, then let it curl around by the natural curl of the line, and stick it through the eyelet again. And here's my tag end. You don't need a very long tag end when you do this type of knot. Then grab that hook by the shank down there, and grab the line too. And now what you got is you got this loop, and you got the fishing line through the eyelet twice. Then you take this end of the loop towards the eyelet and you start to wrap it around the shank, and you wrap it around the shank 6, 7, 8 times. Smaller line you wrap more. There, you wrap it around there, then you put your fingers on them loops, they don't go nowhere, and then you take this end and you slowly pull this end back through. And you can tighten down your snell knot. And there you go. You got a pretty good snell knot. Good and strong. Then I want to loop in the end of this, so that's where my 3rd knot comes in. It's called a surgeon's figure 8. It's a real easy knot too. You basically just take the line and you double it back on itself like that. And then you come around like you're going to tie half of a regular overhand knot. Then before you run this loop through this one, you twist this loop 1 time. Then you run that loop through there and then you pull tight. And it's just that quick and easy. And that is a really strong knot for a loop. And then like I say, you can trim your tag ends off. And there you go. You got a nice snelled circle hook with a nice strong loop in it. So in my 4-part series on hooks, knots, and knot tying tools, I covered a lot of tools. I said this is the only one I really use, and I don't even use it that often because I only use it on smaller circle hooks, and I don't use small circle hooks that often. So you want to get yourself some line out here on this end. So that's where your loop's going to get tied when you're done. And you put it across that plate there, and you hold down on it with your finger. Then you stick the circle hook in there, eyelet first, run this line between them prongs. Then you just start to wrap it around this tool from the narrow end to the wide end. I'm going to wrap it about 8 times. It's a pretty thin line. Then you put your finger on them loops like that. This is hard to do so you can see what I'm doing, but and then you take the end of the line you were wrapping and you stick it down through the channel of the tool along the shaft of the hook, shank of the hook, and you pull it out like that, and there's what you got. Now at this point you just keep your finger held down there on tight and you just snap this thing off the tool and it'll put the snell knot right on the shank of the hook. Then you can start to tighten it up a little bit. You're going to have to slide it up towards the eyelet. And you can tighten it really good. And there you got a snell knot. And then of course I would tie a surgeon's figure 8 in this end to make my loop. So we just do that. We flip this guy once. We stick the loop through that loop we just flipped. And tighten her down. And we're going to trim off our tag ends. And like I showed on the other video, if you want to really tighten this thing down, you can actually hook your hook through that little hole in the tool, and then you can pull. You can really tighten it down. And there you go. That's how that tool will do smaller ones. And you got yourself a snelled hook with a nice snell knot. Then the 4th and final knot I use in fishing, I occasionally use this one. I really only use it when I'm tying fishing line to a spinning reel spool. It's the uni knot. Most people know how to tie it, but I'll show you real quick. Start your fishing line, you double it back on itself like that. Then you take that end and you let it curl around and you make another loop. Just like that. So then you take this end here and you wrap it around the both lines together there. And once again I wrap it about 6 times. It's easier to do when I'm not trying to show somebody how to do it on camera. But anyways, I wrap it around about 6 times. We're going to go about 5. Then you can start to tighten it down. Now this knot I think is really important that you wet it. So you wet it and you tighten it down, not quite all the way, maybe to about right there. Then when I put it on my spool, I always wrap it around my spool twice. I do that. So it's wrapped around there twice. Then you can tighten it down some more, so it gets close to your spool. And then you can tighten it down all the way. There you go. Then you just trim off the tag end. Now that's how I attach fishing line to a spinning reel. And then I can crank it on there. It's a nice easy knot and it works good. The harder you pull, the tighter it gets.
And I'll see you on the next video.
Good knot for starting out line on a spinning reel.